The Passover meal was laid out, a feast of tradition and remembrance. The table was adorned with the finest linens, and the candles flickered softly, casting long shadows on the walls. Each dish was meticulously prepared, a testament to the reverence of the occasion. The aroma of roasted lamb and herbs filled the air, mingling with the scent of freshly baked bread and the tang of wine. It was a sensory symphony, a prelude to the solemnity that would soon unfold. A sense of unease hung heavy in the room, a stark contrast to the festive occasion. The disciples, though gathered for a celebration, could not shake the feeling that something momentous was about to happen. Jesus sat at the head of the table, his gaze sweeping over his disciples. His eyes, usually filled with warmth and compassion, now held a deep sadness, a premonition of what was to come. His eyes held a deep sadness, a premonition of what was to come. He knew that this meal would be their last together, and the weight of that knowledge bore heavily on him. The disciples, oblivious to the impending doom, ate and talked amongst themselves. They laughed and shared stories, unaware of the storm that was brewing just beyond the horizon.
My heart pounds in my chest, a drumbeat of anxiety. Each beat echoes in my ears, a constant reminder of the betrayal I am about to commit. I feel trapped, caught in a web of my own making. The walls seem to close in around me, and I struggle to breathe under the weight of my guilt. The weight of my impending betrayal presses down on me, a suffocating burden. I can see the trust in their eyes, and it only makes the pain sharper, the guilt more unbearable.
Peter, ever the boisterous one, engaged in lively conversation with John. Their voices rose above the murmur of the others, a brief respite from the tension that filled the room. Their laughter echoed in the room, a hollow sound against the backdrop of Judas's inner turmoil. The contrast was stark, a reminder of the duality of human experience. Mary Magdalene sat quietly beside Jesus, her eyes fixed on him. She could sense the heaviness in his heart, the unspoken words that lingered on his lips. She sensed the darkness that surrounded them, a palpable tension in the air. Her intuition told her that this night would change everything. She reached out and gently touched his hand, offering a silent comfort. Her touch was a promise, a vow to stand by him no matter what was to come.
Take this, all of you, and eat of it, for this is my body, which will be given up for you. His voice was steady, filled with a quiet strength that belied the gravity of his words.
His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Each syllable was a thread, weaving a tapestry of sacrifice and redemption. The disciples, unaware of the true significance of his words, partook of the bread, their faces etched with a mixture of confusion and reverence. They could sense that something profound was happening, even if they did not fully understand it. Jesus then lifted a cup of wine, his eyes meeting each of theirs in turn. "This is my blood, the blood of the new covenant, poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins," he said, his voice unwavering. The disciples exchanged puzzled glances, the weight of his words slowly sinking in. They drank from the cup, a ritual that now held a deeper, more poignant meaning. Despite the tension, Jesus' expression remained serene. He knew that his time was near, but he also knew that his sacrifice would pave the way for a new beginning. As the meal concluded, the disciples rose from the table, their hearts heavy with the weight of the evening's revelations. They followed Jesus out into the night, the shadows of the garden awaiting them. The Garden of Gethsemane lay ahead, bathed in the silvery light of the moon. It was a place of solace, but tonight it would become a place of sorrow and betrayal. Jesus knelt in prayer, his heart heavy with the knowledge of what was to come. He prayed for strength for his disciples and for the world that would be forever changed by his sacrifice. As he prayed, the sound of approaching footsteps broke the silence. The soldiers had arrived, led by one of his own. The hour of betrayal was at hand. Judas stepped forward, his face a mask of resolve and regret. He kissed Jesus, the signal of betrayal, and the soldiers moved in to arrest him. The disciples watched in horror as Jesus was seized, their hearts breaking at the sight. The night of shadows had begun, and the world would never be the same. Judas picked at the food on his plate, his appetite gone. The once inviting aroma of the meal now seemed repulsive, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within him. Each bite felt like a betrayal to his own conscience, a reminder of the dark path he had chosen. The weight of his secret gnawed at him, a constant reminder of his impending betrayal. It was as if a heavy stone was lodged in his chest, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. Every moment was a struggle to maintain his composure, to hide the storm raging inside. He cast furtive glances at the other disciples, wondering if they suspected anything. Their laughter and camaraderie felt like a distant echo, a world he no longer belonged to. He scrutinized their faces, searching for any sign of suspicion, any hint that they knew of his treachery. He felt isolated, alone in his turmoil. The bond he once shared with his fellow disciples now felt like a fragile thread, ready to snap at any moment. The room, filled with familiar faces, felt like a prison, each wall closing in on him, suffocating him with guilt. The room seemed to spin around him, a dizzying vortex of guilt and fear. His vision blurred, and he clutched his head, trying to steady himself. The voices of his friends became distant murmurs, drowned out by the deafening roar of his own conscience.
The 30 pieces of silver, the price of my treachery. He stared at the coins, their cold metallic glint, a stark reminder of his betrayal. Each piece felt like a shackle, binding him to a fate he could no longer escape. The thought of the money brings a fleeting sense of relief, a momentary escape from the suffocating guilt. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to believe that the silver could solve his problems, that it could buy him a new beginning. But the relief is short-lived, quickly replaced by a deeper sense of despair. The weight of his actions bore down on him, crushing any hope of redemption. The silver, once a symbol of opportunity, now felt like a curse, a constant reminder of his fall from grace. I know that the money will never bring me peace, only a lifetime of regret. The coins felt heavy in his hands, each one a testament to his betrayal. He knew that no amount of silver could ever wash away the stain on his soul. I followed him for 3 years, witnessed his miracles, and listened to his teachings. Each memory was a dagger to his heart, a reminder of the bond he had shattered. He had seen the blind regain their sight, the lame walk, and the dead rise. Yet he had chosen to betray the one who made it all possible. I believed in him, loved him even. His teachings had given Judas a sense of purpose, a reason to believe in something greater than himself. But now that love was tainted, overshadowed by the darkness of his actions. But now, my love is tainted with betrayal, a bitter poison that corrodes my soul. The conflict within him was unbearable, a constant battle between his loyalty and his guilt. Each passing moment felt like an eternity, a relentless torment that offered no respite.
The whispers of doubt grew louder in his mind, taunting him, accusing him. He felt like a puppet on a string, manipulated by forces beyond his control. He wanted to confess, to beg for forgiveness, but the words wouldn't come, trapped in his throat by a knot of fear and shame. The voices in his head were relentless, each one a reminder of his impending doom. He longed for the courage to speak, to unburden his soul, but fear held him captive. He rose abruptly from the table, his chair scraping against the floor. The sudden movement startled the others, drawing their attention. He could feel their eyes on him, their curiosity and concern piercing through his fragile facade.
I must go. The words were barely audible, a whisper that carried the weight of his torment. He couldn't bear to stay any longer, the walls of the room closing in on him, suffocating him with their silent judgment.
He mumbled, his voice barely a whisper. The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. As he walked away, he could feel the eyes of his friends on his back, their unspoken questions hanging in the air. Each step felt like a march towards his own execution, a journey he could not turn back from. Judas slipped out of the upper room, the cool night air a welcome relief from the stifling atmosphere inside. He walked quickly, his footsteps echoing on the cobblestone streets. His destination was the house of Caiaphas, the high priest. He had made a bargain with Caiaphas, a pact sealed with the promise of silver. He arrived at Caiaphas's house, his heart pounding in his chest. He knocked on the door, his hand trembling. A servant opened the door, his face impassive. Judas stepped inside, the darkness of the house mirroring the darkness in his own heart. He was ushered into a room where Caiaphas awaited him.
You have come. Have you made the arrangements?
Yes, I will lead you to him. But there is one condition.
And what is that?
I will identify him with a kiss of betrayal.
Very well. A kiss it shall be then.
Judas led the soldiers to the Garden of Gethsemane, his heart heavy with dread. Each step felt like a march towards his own doom, the weight of his actions pressing down on him. He knew what he was about to do, the gravity of his betrayal weighing down on him like a physical burden. The silver coins in his pocket felt like lead, a constant reminder of his treachery. He walked through the garden, the moonlight casting long, eerie shadows. The trees seemed to whisper his name, their branches reaching out like accusing fingers. The air was still, heavy with anticipation. Every rustle of leaves, every distant sound seemed amplified, echoing his inner turmoil. He saw Jesus kneeling under an olive tree, his face bathed in moonlight. The sight of his serene figure, deep in prayer, made Judas's heart ache with regret. He was praying, his voice a soft murmur. The words were indistinct, but the tone was one of deep sorrow and resignation.
I want to turn back, to run away, and never look back. The thought of escaping, of undoing his actions, was a fleeting hope that he clung to desperately. But I know I can't. The path he had chosen was irreversible, and the consequences were set in motion. I'm trapped, bound by my promise to Caiaphas. The high priest's words echoed in his mind, a constant reminder of his betrayal.
The soldiers approached Jesus, their weapons glinting in the moonlight. The sight of their drawn swords and torches filled Judas with a sense of dread. Judas stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. Each step felt like a betrayal of his own soul. He looked into Jesus' eyes filled with love and compassion. The depth of that gaze made Judas's resolve waver, if only for a moment. He leaned in and kissed him, a kiss of betrayal, a kiss that sealed Jesus' fate. The act felt like a brand on his soul, an indelible mark of his treachery.
Judas, do you betray the Son of Man with a kiss? The words were spoken softly, yet they carried the weight of 1,000 accusations.
Judas recoiled as if struck. The gentle rebuke hit him harder than any physical blow could. Jesus' words pierced his heart like a dagger, twisting in his gut. The realization of his actions, the full weight of his betrayal, crashed down on him, leaving him in a state of utter despair. As the soldiers seized Jesus, Judas turned away, unable to bear the sight. He walked into the darkness, each step heavier than the last, knowing that he could never undo what he had done. Alone in the shadows, Judas was left to grapple with his guilt. The silver coins, once a symbol of his betrayal, now felt like a curse, a constant reminder of his irreversible actions. He looked at his reflection in a dark pool, seeing not just his face, but the face of a traitor. The water rippled, distorting his image, just as his actions had distorted his soul. Judas wandered through a desolate landscape, his mind a barren wasteland of regret and sorrow. The weight of his betrayal was a burden he would carry for the rest of his days.